This is Purple Radio.
Hello and welcome to Purple Radio's one-on-one interviews with the Durham students nominated to stand as candidates in the upcoming Students' Union election. My name is Gabriel Radis, I'm station manager at Purple Radio, and I'll be interviewing each presidential candidate. Interviewed today, and third on my list of candidates this afternoon, is Seun Twins, current SU president. This interview will be conducted in 4 parts, and the 4 parts will be, we'll first look at eligibility, then policies, the SU, and then Durham as a whole. So, Seun, how are you doing today?
I'm well. That's a lie, actually. It's a pretty weird time, I guess. So I feel like to say I'm well would be to perform for literally no one. I think everybody's very mixture of depressed, anxious, uncertain. So I am what the zeitgeist is right now, which is probably depressed and anxious.
Which is very fair enough. I guess the first thing that springs up about your sort of candidacy for SU president is the fact that you are already SU president. So why again?
Why again? Yeah. So I had to really sit down and ask myself why I'd want to do it again. And it wasn't an easy decision. Like, I won't lie and say I was like, yes, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to be 5 years in Durham in the cold, this Nigerian girl in the cold. Like, it was a tough decision. And I think it came down to just accepting the fact that we've been absolutely formidable this year as Durham students, but also as student officers, with the tasks that we've been given, with no best practice or precedent to compare ourselves to, or to there's no metrics of success, I guess, because we're all born in either the 90s or 2000s, and none of us were here in the Spanish influenza. So we don't really have a track record on how do we survive in a pandemic. So I think we've been absolutely great this year with the task and the times that we've been given. And there's a lot of momentum that I don't want to be neglected or taken for granted. And it really just came down to, what can I ensure for the Durham student? And I started making a list, and that list was a lot longer than the list not to do it. So I decided, be bold, be brave, and do it again.
I mean, it's definitely a role that's normally only taken once. Have you been worried that the response will be that you're depriving other candidates of the opportunity of being SU president?
Not really. I think what's interesting about Durham is that very few people rerun. So if you look at other SUs and other SPAC officers that I've spoken to just throughout the past 6 months, everybody has seen this year as a test year, this year we're going to be firefighters, we're going to, just look at crises and try and diffuse them, and it's going to deprive us from our own creative innovation and what we can do in our manifestos, but it's okay because we are firefighters currently. And I really felt that this year. I felt like there was just a problem after a problem after a problem. It was respond to this, deal with this, communicate this. And I feel like I've been deprived of the chance to enact my vision and my plan. So I think it's not about depriving other people. I think that in one way or another, everybody's been deprived this year. And it's the best person for it, rather than everyone should get a go, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, I guess it's important at this juncture to take a look back at last year, and it's important to look at the manner in which last year's election sort of manifested itself. How do you feel ahead of it, another election and so on, given how acrimonious that election was?
Yeah, that's a good question. How do I feel about this election in comparison to the last election? I feel like we should be proud about all the stuff that we've done in the past 11 months, in terms of mending a lot of like trauma, a lot of healing, a lot of reintroducing a lot of like ourselves to each other, reintroducing the Durham student to the Durham student body. So on a personal front, yeah, I feel anxious as a woman of color, having to do a campaign online, being succumb to a lot of unnecessary scrutiny, a lot of racial slurs, a lot of just unnecessary sexist content. Yeah, I feel anxious about it. As a presidential candidate, yeah, again, there is that fear that I will be held up to a different standard than other people based on reasons that are not particularly valid or substantial. But then also, as a current president, there is that fear of the past 6 months, are people going to judge me for what I did in a pandemic, or et cetera, et cetera. So there are many different frontiers in which I feel anxious on, but I like to focus on the good bits, and the good bits are being bold and taking the chance. And you only have a once in a lifetime chance to create a legacy and to enact change and leave something behind that makes Durham a better place. And this is my last chance to do that. So I'm going to obviously take up that chance and do that.
Do you feel like you're being more scrutinized than the other candidates, or than other people who, aren't Black women, who aren't being,
So if you asked me last year, I would have said no, but not because it wasn't true, but I know that nobody wants to hear that. No one really particularly cares about me personally, or how I feel, or my chronic anxiety, or whatever. No one really cares. Because no one really cares, but also because I'm a Black woman as well. And people tried to say that I was using the race card last year. So in order to just not talk about race, I just didn't talk about race. But then I decided to be unapologetic and realized that my politics is linked to my identity. So yes, I do feel like that. I feel like people just try to find the smallest reasons to make me problematic, or to invalidate my intellectual rigor, or my competency, is that a noun? For presidency, which is weird, because if you look at my track record, if you look at my qualifications, I'm more than qualified, if not like at the top. So there is that, but it doesn't help me to focus on that, because it will just make me wallow in a depression. So I'd rather just say, yes, I feel like I'm scrutinized, but I don't focus on it, because it doesn't help anyone for me to focus on it.
And you mentioned that you're political, and I think it's fair to say that you are vociferously political. Do you find that different? Do you find it difficult to reconcile the fact that you are very political with the multifarious nature of politics at Durham, and how different there are in terms of the political spectrum at Durham?
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm non-partisan publicly, so no one knows who I vote for, no one knows who I cast a ballot for. I think I'm very staunchly small p political, 100%, and I think that is linked to my identity. But I also think that linked to the fact that I care about other communities that are not my own, and I also care about my community. I think everyone should have a right to be in a safe space, a right to dissent, a right to have discourse, and I think those are inherently political. I think democracy, I think culture, I think our curriculum is political, and to deny it of its inherent political nature is to be, frankly, naive, or intentionally naive. So I think it's not that I am political. I think there are less political people than me, and that should be our focus. Why are people so afraid to be political? Because being political is fun and interesting and valid and great for the progression of our society. So I'm not really ashamed of it. Again, if you asked me 12 months ago, I would have been like, no, I'm not political. It's just about, but now I'm like, no, let's embrace it. Our world is on fire right now. And the only way we can get through it is having debate where we can compromise and be compassionate. And if that's not politics, then I don't know what it is.
And I guess, having spoken about being political, or the idea of being political, it's important that we talk about policies and look at what you have done over the past year and scrutinize that. What do you think you've done? What do you regard as your greatest success of this year?
I've had a lot of successes. Oh, I sound so arrogant, but also stand in my feminism. Yes, I've had a lot of successes this year. I think my main one is my labor of love, my culture commission. It came from my brain. It was shaped by many other people outside of my brain, but I take ownership from it. I think it's one of the rare times. I think 2020 was a very crucial year. Number one, we witnessed one of the most visible social justice movements of our lifetime, with obviously Black Lives Matter. But also we're in a pandemic, and we had to interact with sustainability and environmentalism in a more urgent way. Obviously Greta doing amazing things. And then obviously in our university, it became a very hostile environment. For example, elections, leaks online, things like that. So I think I really took that opportunity to be like, you know what? We always talk about this thing about culture, Durham culture, but no one knows how to identify it, locate it, define it. And I took it upon myself to do so. I did it in a democratic way. I did it so people can be inclusive and compassionate, but I took that opportunity and I made it into something that will outlive me, outlast me, be material, be sustainable, but also be a chance for students to talk about themselves in a way that they've never been given the chance to do so. So definitely the Culture Commission. Definitely the Culture Commission.
And by that same token, what do you think you perhaps came into the role wanting to do or tried to do but hasn't worked? What's been your greatest sort of shortcoming?
Greatest shortcoming. I wouldn't say it's something that hasn't been done. I would say that something that it could just be better. So I ran on last year was about consultation, student consultation, and no more haphazard student consultation. I think I've done that personally. I think I've consulted everyone around me, brought people to the table, added more seats to the table, but I've not implemented anything structurally that means that outside of my leadership, these things would like be guarantees. But I proposed a student representation working group, which basically just evaluates student representation throughout the uni. So that's like a new thing, but I think that could have been a lot more bolder and visible, but it's also really new as well. So I can't really evaluate 6 months worth of work whilst being in the 6 months worth of work, I guess.
And you mentioned what you ran on last year, and I had a watch of your manifesto video from last year. You did mention that you wanted the university to quote it needs to pay greater attention to mental health of students. Do you think that's happened?
Okay, so I think it's multifaceted. I think that the work and labor of student activists, student leaders, FREPs, common room presidents, society leaders, association presidents, sabbatical officers, etc., has been undervalued and underappreciated 1,000%. I think that they do a lot of front house work for the university that the university doesn't appreciate. I think there's like a lack of communication, a lack of just thanks on that front. I think the average student has been protected by things that they obviously can't see and aren't particularly tangible. I mean, they're palpable, but you can't really see them. I think it's now time for the university to look at the work it puts on its students to engineer its own safe spaces and things like that, and show like actual sincere earnest thanks, but also just resource that work. Like a lot of them are like student volunteers. Like I get paid, but FREPs don't, and they literally put themselves in a very dangerous environment at the beginning of the year. And a lot of them got sick for it, and the only people that were saying thank you for the work you've done were SU sabbatical officers. It wasn't the university saying you literally helped us out in the most important time of the year.
Going forward and looking ahead towards this coming year, what is on your manifesto this year that wasn't rather last year?
Cool. So it's a 14-point manifesto, right? And it goes back to me finding my why I want to do it again. And I was just like jotting things down, like what I would do, blah, blah. And then I broke up into 4 points. So the first is experience leadership. Second is cultural change. Third is further empower student reps. And fourth is a transparent and effective SU. So I would say what wasn't on my manifesto last year was the cultural change stuff, I guess. But obviously the Cultural Commission came post me winning. So there's that stuff. A lot of stuff about sustainability that I think I neglected last year because my environmentalism was very like infantile, like it wasn't mature yet. So now I'm definitely on my environmentalist wave. And last but not least, a transparent and effective SU. I think I ran last year based on what I could do as a leader, not being responsible for an entire organization, but now I am responsible for an entire organization. I want it to be the best it can be. So I'd say that those are new features.
You mentioned environmentalism, and I think Anna Marshall has been particularly vociferous and loud about this, and to her great credit. I think it ties into the next element, the SU, and looking at, let's say you were to be re-elected as SU president, you would have a whole new batch of officers with new ideas and new thought processes. How would you, let's say you were interested in continuing with the environmentalism track, but there are officers that aren't that interested in that element of things. How would you reconcile working with a completely new team that you have had no prior experience with?
I think we need to stop talking in zero-sum terms. There is time, money, resources in the entire world to do everything that is urgent now, right? So I think a reason why I'm rerunning is to obviously not neglect the momentum of everything that we've done this year in terms of culture, sustainability, democracy, deco, PG representation and welfare, mental health, etc., etc. So a lot of that would be on my buck, right? That's my responsibility. But I also think that Anna's been incredible, if not imperative. But Anna's work is very much on the shoulders of EcoDU. So in the absence of Anna, it would be getting them in the room, getting them in those spaces so they can speak on behalf of themselves, because they are eloquent and educated and fully capable of doing so. But it would be my responsibility to support them on that journey. So I think Anna's fantastic and honestly one of my favorite people in the world, like I declare. But I also think that there's a plethora of student activists and student leaders that can like fill that space of environmentalism. Like, and environmentalism and sustainability is not Anna's thing. Anna is an advocate for it. And when another advocate goes, another, like, that spaces are filled and inherited.
Sure. You mentioned not talking in binary codes, and I think that is important. And there was something that perhaps could be seen from the outside as being a particular difficulty that the SU experienced this year, and that is of the Palatinate being cut funding and the ramifications of that in the wider media. That went from a sum of money to completely cut. Do you regret completely cutting it, or being part of that group that cut it?
Well, I think it's, when it comes to money, in a pandemic where money is uncertain, there are sacrifices that have to be made, and it is unfortunate that Platinum were victimized to that, like, financial restructuring, I guess. But it's also important to know that that is a COVID related thing. So when we live in a post-COVID related world, that conversation doesn't exist anymore. But I think the SU did a good job in terms of like investing in Platinet's like digital like resourcing, so they can like transport themselves online and be very effective online. Obviously, we've seen them being very effective online. So I think that when one door closes in terms of like financing, the capabilities of being online also opens as well. And Platinum have navigated that space really well.
But do you regret not going for an integrated approach that might not have received the kind of, and I don't want to say vitriol because that's quite harsh, but the vitriol that a lot of SU officers received off the back of that?
I don't really know how to answer that. I think it's unfortunate that it happened, but the context was COVID, and as a result of that, more innovative ways that Platinum could thrive online were had commenced. So I don't regret that Platinum has done really well online as a result to that decision. I guess that's my answer to that.
Obviously, we talk about COVID and post-COVID worlds, and next year, let's not pretend it's not going to be a totally post-COVID world. COVID will still form a major part of SU life. Do you envisage having to make similarly difficult decisions regarding monies and finances?
Well, I am not Mystic Meg. I know I look like it, but I cannot read the future. So I'm not sure. It probably will happen. Everybody needs to be realistic about that in terms of finances and capability. Well, I do think that, again, I think I'm being really moist here by being like, let's look at the bright side. COVID has opened us up to be very radical and creative and innovative about our thinking. So if COVID is still an obstacle next year, the question and the framework should now shift to what can we do to like invest in communities and safe spaces and democracy and things like that, which I think we've started this year as well. So it wouldn't be starting from scratch. It wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. It would be continuing to be innovative and creative and stuff like that. So I can't predict where the shortcomings will come from. The shortcomings are probably going to be inevitable, but that's the reality that we are presented with. And the only thing we can do is be better and be bolder.
Yeah. Also, looking at another of the SU's policies that have been instigated this year has been the RON application process and the individual element of RON and how there isn't one RON applicant, but rather a number of them. How do you think that has manifested in the public sphere, or do you think that in hindsight it's worked, or you're happy with how it looks?
Well, I think in 2020, I made an active decision to not engage in online discourse. Well, not firsthand online discourse. I think people tell me things, and I make my decision from there. So I don't really like to make. I wouldn't know how to gauge public perception over a decision that I had no hand in, I guess. Because obviously I'm not an elections administrator and I'm just a sabbatical officer rather than SU staff. But how it was perceived, I think what's interesting about Ron is that people had very many reasons for voting Ron. And one of the major reasons, actually, I won't finish that sentence. However, there are many reasons why people voted Ron. And the decision about Ron for this year is a result for one of the reasons why people voted Ron. So it can't satisfy everyone, but it does satisfy a lot of discourse from 2020. So I can only read it as that, I guess. And as somebody who's running in that election, but also is an SU officer now and was a previous candidate in that election, I don't really know what Seun answers that question, I guess.
Sure, and I think that's understandable. If we transport or transpose last year's results onto this year, and let's say there is a wrong candidate that wins and you come second, would you accept, if let's say the SU came to you and asked you to become president again for the next year, would you accept that result?
Again, I'm not Mystic Meg, so I don't know what I'll do. I don't even know what I'll do in the next 3 hours, let alone the next 2 weeks. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to my list and go, is the why still there? Like, do I need to be here? Is this Allah coming to me and saying, you know what, it's time to apply to do a master's and just marry rich? Like, I'm not sure. I don't know what I'll do. So yeah, I'm gonna say I'm not sure. I think I'll write my list and be honest with myself about what I want to do, what I want to achieve, and if this is the right space to do it. And if it is the right space to do it, also being like taking ownership in that decision as well. So again, I'm not sure. Not Mystic Meg in conclusion.
COVID-19 has undoubtedly had an incredibly important, significant impact on your time as SU president. How much have you felt the SU has done over the past year? Are you happy with progress and how it's managed to cope and get through what has been an ostensibly now an impossible opportunity, the sort of task to navigate through?
Yeah, I think as I've said, not everyone will be satisfied with just how anyone has acted or any stakeholders in this world that we live in, I guess, or in these times. But I think it's also important to pat yourself on the back, and I think survival is should not be understated. Like, the fact that a lot of us are still alive is really important as well. I think burnout is real, and I think people taking time off to just reflect on that is fine and is okay. Am I satisfied? I'll never be satisfied. I think you always have to strive to be better. But do I acknowledge that we've been absolutely formidable this year as a student body, as an SU, as an officer team, as me as president? I do acknowledge that, and I'm not afraid of saying, if you look at like our stats and performance on culture, sustainability, democracy, deco, PG welfare, PG representation, housing, sustainability, consultation, representation, visibility, trust in the SU, like the list goes on, and it doesn't mean it's a 10 out of 10, but I would say it's a strong 7.9, like, and I really would. And I think the rest of that, like, the reason why it's not a 10 is because of things that we couldn't control or decisions we made, uninformed decisions we made or things like that. So I think, like, I'm not afraid of being proud of what we've done this year at all.
For sure. And maybe a final point on SU and perhaps the kind of your relationship as an SU president in a certain guise. The exam mitigation policy and the safety net has been an issue and has been something that has been banded around by a number of students, and a lot of people are very vocal on how concerned they are this year. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there is an extended zone of discretion that you are advocating for, or a part of it. Perhaps could you explain a little bit more about what you have been pushing for and what you seek from the university in response to obviously the mitigation policies?
Of Cool. Yeah, so I think safety net is a really interesting one because it's a sector-wide issue, and it's less the university being like actively resistant and just being antagonistic because they don't value student mental health. I think a lot of it is that, actually, and let's really be honest, I think a lot of it is prioritizing grade integrity over student mental health. But it's very evident that it's OFS, the Office for Students, the regulator, who are making these calls, like governmental bodies that are making these calls. So I think I have some sort of appreciation there. In terms of safety net, what I wanted and what the SU wanted were the academic officers who have been absolutely formidable in this space. And I think it's more them to speak about this, and the faculty reps, is a plethora of policies that equate to something of what we had last year, all but in name. And we got that. I think we got about 8 policies. I think it's like 8. I'm not sure what the number is. That catch students at multiple levels. So it's like ad hoc, like revisionists being like, okay, you didn't perform well, let's see this. There's also like simplification of SAC forms. There's also extensions and zones of discretion, things like that. So I think it's more, it's not one thing, it's about covering students on all fronts. So no students or no minority of students fall in those cracks. And I think it's being aware like who the stakeholders are. Like, it's the examiners, it's the academics that have to mark it, it's the students themselves, it's scaling, it's past performance, it's the OFS, it's the uni, it's a lot of different people. So from what those discussions are, I'm broadly satisfied. I think the student body will be broadly satisfied, but also I think also it's just been a weird year. So I think any success is a good success.
100%. Now turning to sort of Durham as an overview, you obviously sit on the Senate as SU president. How has it been being a representative voice for students amidst these times, but sitting on an incredibly high level board like the Senate?
Yeah, so I sit on Senate. I also sit on council as well. Yeah, I think, okay, so what's really interesting is that the officers last year did a lot of groundwork for us in terms of like demanding like respect for students in this space when people are being paid 10,000 times what we're being paid, and they're like a million times older than us with like 10 more degrees, right? So there is that element of, am I going to bring enough gravitas to it? So I do commend the officers that came before us. I think what we did as an officer team, but also what I did, is nurture a lot of positive relationships with individual people on those boards. So when we come to that space, at least we're not like fighting unnecessary fights. And I think what I've done really well this year is that I've retained that like unapologetic boldness from my character and brought it into my professional life, which means that when we have these fights about housing or safety net or deco or sustainability, there is that respect, there is that ground level of respect already. And not to be arrogant, but I really don't see how anybody who doesn't have that like skill or quality into just making people respect you, having gravitas, but also in a very positive and nurturing way, would be able to operate in those spaces. And that's why different SU presidents have different successes. And that's why I've done really well this year, because I was able to be like there's only a certain amount, I have a threshold for compromise, and anything above that I won't tolerate. And because there's respect there, because there's charisma there, and because there's just a culture of behavior there, I was able to navigate those spaces really well.
And amidst sitting on the council and Senate, I imagine there are times when there are students that have, or there's been a vocal number of students that have purported an idea or an argument that you don't necessarily believe in, but that there is enough sort of groundswell of support for you to push it. How comfortable do you feel in that situation, being a representative of something that you don't believe in?
I think it happens really rarely, but when it happens, it happens. I think it's about being a leader and being a service person. And sometimes being a leader means you have to have faith in your own ideas, and like have integrity in your own ideas and own those ideas and be like, no, this is actually a superior idea. We should really go for it and sell it. And I think there's being a service person, which is just like, as I said before, bringing people to the table, being a mouthpiece, being a facilitator, being an advocate. So it's about having the humility to be like, today I'm not a leader, today I'm a service person. For example, this is not a time of contention, but in Senate, when we were discussing the safety net policy, it was all of the officers plus the faculty reps. And even though as president, my role as a spokesperson, I took a seat back there because I know that there's a way to deliver this sentiment of student mental health that I particularly shouldn't be the one delivering. It should be a current student, right? So I knew my job was to like man the chat, make sure that like highlight in red. I think my catchphrase was, I highlight in red what the faculty people said. And it really worked because it bolstered that student voice and it added onto it rather than being like, no, the student voice can only come through the president. I think that's a really arrogant and ineffective way to lead. And only somebody who's been in that position would know how to navigate that. And I think that's why I'm rerunning.
Definitely. A couple more last sort of final questions as we near the end of it. New chancellor, also rather new vice chancellor next year. How do you feel ahead of that?
I'm feeling really positive about it. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm on the vice chancellor's recruitment, so I have that I have the privilege of specificity. I have the privilege of like holding them to account because I know what their interview process was. I know what their CV was. I know their backstory. I've been in a rigorous interviewing sesh with them. So I think we're going to find out who the vice chancellor is not soon because of obviously COVID delays and stuff. So we're still in that process. But I do have that element of when they come and when they inherit that role, I can set the agenda because I have more knowledge of them, of the institution, and I'm not afraid of them because I've had a vice chancellor before and I know how it works. Again, we wouldn't be starting from scratch or reinventing the wheel. And I think it's a really crucial time for students to really like, no, we care about environmentalism. No, we care about you being visible. And it's not about you restructuring Durham. It's about what can you add to Durham. But it's also about us setting the agenda. So I'm actually really excited for it. And I'm excited like for us to just be a chance to be, I don't know, a bit radical. I think Durham has this thing where we're very bureaucratic and a lot of things that happen are really slow. So this is like a changing of the guard and means we can just like sneak in there and be like, no, all right, this is what we're going to do for them. This is the 5-year plan, I guess.
And in one sentence, and I've asked everyone this, what would an SU presidency look like with you at the helm in 21-22?
An SU president with Seun twins as continuing on as president would be more unapologetic boldness, vibrant and inclusive leadership, humility, but also being creative and allowing students to take charge and understanding what the difference between a service person is and a leader is, and not being afraid to own their decisions.
Going for a 5th year in Durham, you feeling up for it?
Mate, I'm bloody tired, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's fine. I'll just buy a new wig and be like, I'm a different person now. I'll be fine. Don't worry. It's what, 5 years? That's fine. Not as if you've taken my entire post-adolescence. But no, it would be fine.
Cool. Seun twins, thank you so much for the time.
Brilliant.
For more of Purple Radio's interviews with candidates in the run-up to the SU election, click on the playlist now.